Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're now moving on to the second stage of the Offshore Strategy Day, which is really getting into some of the details, some of the projects that are actually going into the water. So we've heard from the policy. Now we're going to hear about some of the exciting developments that are going into European waters in the years ahead. Very happy to pass the floor, first of all, to Martin Edlund, CEO of Minesto, who's doing some really exciting stuff with tidal kites in the Faroe Islands. So, Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. Maybe it was a mistake to take on the jacket here in this warm day in Brussels. Anyway, we are a tidal stream developer, been around for more than 10 years, and we have a technology based on a kite system that's tethered to the seabed. I'll not give you any details on how the technology works today. If you need to check out our website if you're not familiar with what we're doing. We have invested around 100 million euros in this technology over a decade, which makes it one of the most heavily backed ocean energy technologies in the world, actually, for those numbers. And it's highly proprietary with 12 patent families covering this. If you look at the investments into this, for most, it's private equity that's into this. So I put the logo of Nasdaq First North, growth markets in Stockholm up there. We have 30,000 shareholders supporting this. Second on that list is the utility in the Faroe Islands, with the support and commitment and investments they're making in infrastructure and backing this makes them a key actor in this. And I think the customer perspective is where I'm going to dwell here for my 50 minutes or so. Then, of course, immature technologies with a technology risk to it needs mitigation when you ask people to put money into it and invest. And in that sense, the EU and government funding is absolutely critical. We need to put some of that in to reduce the technology risk and other risks associated with it. And I think that partnership has worked really well for us. So out of those 100 million euros, 40 of them is actually public investments. So like it or not, I think that we're all here are actually investors in Minesto in that sense. So what do you see here? Well, you see the towing of our system into the production site in a place called Vestmannasund in the Faroe Islands. This is roughly the third generation of systems that we're building, and we're extremely pleased with the performance and behavior of this system. So we proudly put sort of the label product on this, not just a prototype. And this has enabled us to move into large-scale project build-out, engagement with serious project investors, and taking the company forward. So I'll stick to the customer perspective, but before I do that, just let me give you just a few views on this successful commissioning that we're involved in the Faroes. I mean, we're considering the logistics. 100 kilowatt machine fits nicely into a 20-foot container. We pre-assemble and test everything factory-based in Sweden, and then we do the final assembly on quayside. There's quite a few subsystems that needs to be attended to: cooling, turbine, to weigh in the system, connecting everything up. So we bring the team over from Sweden and from the UK, also working with our local partner Seb there to get the infrastructure ready. To weigh it in, it's important that it's buoyant on the right level for us in the way we fly. And then last but not the least in this is to be able to tow it out with a small workboat. And I think you can compare the size of this vessel to some of our colleagues in this industry, what they're using. And this is also good for a 1.2 megawatt unit that we're putting in later this year. Extremely important. It's a local workboat. The captain and the owner of it, Seaman, is a good friend of Minesto. And that kind of local support where you need to check your technology, inspect it, upgrade, work with it, is something that saves us enormous amounts of money by having that in place locally. And what you see here is actually from this early morning. The tidal cycle this morning in Vestmanna was quite okay for us. So the system is installed, it's generating, and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. I think this is the first time we show the control interface, actually. So it's in that sense perhaps a little bit historic, but as you see, I don't reveal too much of the technical data to it. And you can see that the commissioning team is quite happy with what we're doing here. And yes, customer values then. Why is it possible for us to work on a 120 megawatt rollout agenda in the Faroe Islands? An island with 50,000 people, and this would be equivalent to around 40% of their generation capacity. Well, the reason is really related to creating the most cost-effective net zero energy system. I'll give you some details on that, but that's important. And it's also important that that net zero political target decision made here to be there by 2030 is something that supports the other main industries in the Faroes quite well. It's tourism and it's food production from the ocean. So the salmon farmers in the Faroes, among the largest actors in the world, actually are based in the Faroes. They go all in on sustainable salmon, not even flying it to certain markets. So the big sashimi restaurants in Manhattan, they have new processes and procedures and technologies to bring fresh sashimi right in there. So you can imagine this country with, when the wind is not blowing and they need to crank on their diesel generators. That's not a good thing for their biggest industry. So there's momentum and drive in it. Same thing with tourism, high-end Asian tourists, European tourists. They don't want to bombard those islands with windmills. There's plenty of room, but still there is a limit to how much of that you want. And security of supply, of course. Being dependent on diesel, yes, they probably have some safeguards built in when there are fluctuating energy prices. But in the long run, that's going to be difficult. If we then look into some of the values on the higher system level, where I think we should be as an industry, to look into what value we bring. It's not all about levelized cost of energy, project-based, penny by penny in this. It's really a matter of understanding the cost of the transition at the larger scale. And with the University of Aalborg, SEV, there are some reference in this that you can check up. It's obviously so that if they go all wind with a scenario on the left here, that means that they're going to build significantly more capacity to compensate for when the wind is only blowing so-so. So we're talking here out of a capacity of 400 megawatts installed. We can reduce that with 80 megawatts by reducing the amount of wind power we're building here. And you should be aware of that this is offshore wind quality onshore, because it's just sort of a dot in the middle of the Atlantic. And this is sort of one area where we can make the numbers come together with a somewhat early stage, more expensive solution that we bring. That's the one thing. The other one is related to storage. We should all be aware that the wind industry is massively talking about storage as a solution. They're much better at lobbying than we are, and I mean, they're doing great in many ways, and storage is going to be there. But it's also a cost associated with storage. And storage does not bring value. Generation brings value. And we can reduce storage significantly by putting those tidal farms in different fjords in the Faroes. We get a phase shift and we get a steady base load. So the small share of hydropower they have can be saved to a larger degree, and we don't need to build concrete dams and invest in pump storage and other things. Extremely important on the total bill for going net zero. And the numbers may not mean too much to you, but if we look at the scenario 100% renewable, there's really a matter of avoiding that build out. And also from a carbon footprint perspective, it's going to be massive with the carbon emissions on all that concrete being built. So for us, this is very much about creating value for the local society, bringing an affordable economic way of going net zero for this community. And that's why we have the political system, the utilities, and actually, I dare to say also the people of the Faroes with us in moving in this direction. So what is it that we're doing hands-on? Well, first, we're building out the site that we have in Vestmanna. This is for fine-tuning and getting production data. So we're talking about adding one more 100 kilowatt unit so we can run a mini array with 2 systems. And we're later this year also putting in the first 1.2 megawatt unit in this context. All grid connected under the existing power purchase agreement that we're happy with. But the real thing moving forward is really about the first serious array. And the current environment onshore here is going to be used to serve this first, let's say, installation I showed you, but also to support what's coming next in the so-called Hestfjord. We have, together with the utility, we have in detail done vessel-based ADCP measurements of all sea territories and targeted, let's say, 5 underwater waterfalls or rivers that are perfect for our solutions. And this build out is going to happen until 2030. By 2025, we're going to work on the first 10 plus 20 megawatts in the Hestfjord that I'm talking about. And in addition to this, there are also smaller islands where microgrid solutions will be needed, that we're looking into 3 islands to do this, where this 100 kilowatt machine will be really nice to put in for that need. We're into detailed planning on how we configure the sites, how we connect grids. The utility and the site is already investing in the onshore grid capacity to make it work together with a 30 megawatt installation here. It's just 10 kilometers from the main town. And we're looking into detailed array designs on how to configure them, what subsea hubs and transformation that is needed in doing this. And of course, we are way underway with environmental consenting and that side of it. I'd say that we've been in many contexts in the world, but this is the most constructive and, let's say, valuable collaboration with the government and the authorities that we've seen ever. They're putting large resource vessels at hand and really work with us together in this sense. And we are now with sort of the verification of this Dragon class systems that we're making. We're also very confident that we're on the right timelines with the big 1.2 megawatt machine. And you see it's been manufactured in Uddevalla on the Swedish west coast, with actually our customers visiting it in Uddevalla on top there. That's the size of the nacelle where the generator will fit into the wing. And we're doing now this with consistency, with a team that's been around for quite a while. It's quite a shift from just 6-7 years ago. What quality of engineering and staff that you can bring in to be a part of this journey. And I'd say that a lot of those guys have been handpicked, and they say that we're going to leave the dark side and go into the future instead, so we can tell our children that we are actually doing something of value also for them. So I think with that, I've given you a very quick run through of where we are with this. I should also mention before ending that this is the Faroe Islands. In parallel, we're working with a 10 times larger UK market. We're based in Holyhead in Wales, and the roadmap for the UK is around 1 gigawatt, just our technology. And we're also in an extensive project work schedule with 4 different markets in the Southeast Asian area, where we can tenfold that again with 10 gigawatts build out in the making. So we want to take this sector from a niche oriented small scale sector into relevant utility scale with what we're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Martin. Great to see these projects really hitting the water, and great to see the imagery as well. It really brings it to life. Maybe 1 or 2 questions from me. I don't know if there's any questions in the audience. Okay, we've got 1 or 2 online as well, but your final point, you're saying that you're starting in the Faroe Islands, but that's only the first step, right? I mean, there's a lot more projects and deployments, and of course, it's a global market as well. How do we recreate the success from the Faroe Islands globally? I was struck particularly by, you said you've got the people of the Faroe Islands with you. So clearly there's been some engagement there with the community. Can you talk a little bit about that and how we can replicate it?
Well, I mean, it's a huge advantage to work in a society that is small, because the Prime Minister of the Faroe Islands live in that village where we have the service hub, and there is a genuine interest in this 100% renewable journey. They live close to nature and they live close to the sea, so it makes it much easier in that sense. Also with the local utility, of course, on board, doing a lot of legwork in supporting this. But I mean, we had the naming ceremony for this thing at the big boat festival in Vestmannasund here, with there were poems written by sort of the locals to Edlund, as it's called, this first machine. So as long as we keep going and delivering, I think that's going to work fine.
Well, it sounds like it's something to do just inherently with ocean energy. In a sense, it's inherently interesting, and we heard from the UK that it's more popular than Tom Hanks. So I don't know how popular Tom Hanks is in the Faroe Islands, but clearly Wave and Tidal is up there too. We have another question coming online. It's about the funding for the projects. So maybe I'll take that question and redirect it specifically towards the fact that you've got utility involvement. Can you talk a little bit about what the local utility is contributing towards the project?
I mean, they have supported grid connections, consenting, seabed leases, making sure that we have sort of access to the control assets. So our small system is integrated into the total control of the grid in the Faroes already. So that's a huge contribution on their end in that. Since we're a listed company, I cannot go into anything that's not public on how we secure funding for the next phase of what we're doing. But they are, of course, a part in this journey forward with PPA levels, with what support the government is putting in different ways, not the least consenting area. So they play a major role in this going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's true across Europe. Really, utilities are going to be critical to the rollout, and we're lucky to have a few of them in the room with us today. If you could just show your appreciation for Martin. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.